Look, we all know Frank Herbert's Dune is an absolute giant of science fiction. But what if its core conflict isn't just about spice, politics, and giant sandworms? What if it's really a deep, unresolved theological problem? Today, we're going to dive into that exact idea, drawing on some fascinating analysis by the theologian Ryan Haker, who sees in Dune a profound story about technology, faith, and a long line of failed gods.
Think about it for a second. So much of the science fiction we love, from Blade Runner all the way to The Matrix, is obsessed with this idea of the singularity, that moment when humanity and artificial intelligence finally become one. It's a question we've explored 1,000 times.
And this is where Dune just completely flips the script. It doesn't look forward to that merger. Its entire history, its entire universe, is built on what happens after that idea has been violently thrown out. And that one choice, right there, sets up the central drama for the entire epic saga.
To really get Dune, you have to go back to the beginning, to its foundational event, the Butlerian Jihad. This wasn't just a war. It was a galaxy-spanning crusade to overthrow and destroy every single thinking machine. The philosophy behind this whole thing is right there in the book's history. Once, men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free. And you got to understand, this wasn't just, a Terminator-style panic about robots. It was a deep philosophical rejection of outsourcing our own humanity. The goal was to force the human mind to evolve, but, well, this solution created a whole new kind of problem.
So what happens when you banish all the machines? Well, according to Haker's analysis, humanity's conflict with technology didn't just evaporate, it simply moved. It went from being an external battle against a metal enemy to a deep internal crisis within humanity itself.
And this is where things get really wild. Check out this trade-off. Humanity was forced to develop its own potential, creating these specialized schools that basically internalize the very jobs the machines used to do. So, thinking machines? They were replaced by the mentats, these incredible human computers. The predictive power of AI? That got mirrored in the creepy, long-term breeding programs of the Bene Gesserit witches, and the complex math of space travel? That was taken over by the Spacing Guild navigators, who mutated their own bodies with the spice to do it.
And what that means is, there are no aliens in Dune for a reason. Humanity became alien to itself. The Bene Gesserit, the mentats, the navigators, sure, they're all technically human, but they are so hyper-specialized, so far beyond the norm, that they might as well be different species. The fight is no longer against some external machine, but against these alien parts of ourselves.
So how in the world does the story try to fix this deep internal fracture? Well, it creates a prophecy, the coming of the Quasar Haderach, a super being who's supposed to finally bridge all these gaps. But as Hecker points out, what we actually get is this tragic parade of incomplete, deeply flawed saviors. First, you've got Paul Atreides. He seems like the guy, the real deal, but his victory is short-lived, and it just leads to a galaxy-spanning holy war and tyranny. Then his son, Leto II, takes it to a whole other level, merging with a sandworm to become a monstrous god-emperor for thousands of years. And then, way down the line, a reincarnated Duncan Idaho literally merges with a machine, becoming a kind of cyborg god. Each attempt gets more and more extreme, and yet every single one of them fails to truly heal that original split in humanity.
Okay, and this is where Haker's analysis gets really interesting. He argues that this whole pattern of failure, this cycle of broken saviors, can only be truly understood if you compare it to a very specific and very powerful concept from Christian theology.
All right, stick with me here. In Christian doctrine, there's this core idea called the hypostatic union. It's the belief that in the single person of Jesus Christ, two natures, the divine and the human, are perfectly and completely united, without any confusion or separation. It represents an ideal, a total and seamless reconciliation.
Now, put that idea right next to what we see in Dune. Haker calls these unhypostatic unions. They are incomplete, monstrous, chimerical fusions. Paul, Leto, Duncan, they aren't true messiahs. They are tragic parodies of a messiah, each one trying to force together the sundered parts of humanity, the spiritual and the technical, and always falling short. And Haker really hits the nail on the head with this quote. Leto II, in his bizarre worm body, isn't a true savior. He's a tortured figure who can only imitate the sacrifice of a god. He can never achieve that true, complete union that's actually required for salvation. He's a tyrant trying to save humanity by becoming a monster, which is just a fundamentally flawed plan from the start.
So if Dune is just this long story of failed saviors, then what's the point? What's the big takeaway? Well, Hacker suggests that Frank Herbert's saga, maybe even by accident, lays out a blueprint for a totally radical new idea, something he calls techno-mysticism.
Now, this is a seriously mind-bending concept. Instead of seeing technology as the enemy of the spirit, which is the usual sci-fi trope, techno-mysticism suggests that technology can actually be a pathway to spiritual or even divine knowledge. And believe it or not, Dune's universe shows us exactly how that could work.
And the way Dune lays this path out is just brilliant. Step 1, you exile the external machines. That forces humanity to look inward, to develop its own mind. Step 2, you internalize those technical skills, like the Bene Gesserit's perfect biological control or a Mentat's cold logic, and you train them to mystical levels. And finally, step 3, these highly developed spiritual technologies become the very tools you use to achieve a higher understanding of God and the universe.
So in the end, this whole cycle of flawed messiahs in Dune, it's not just a downer. It's a story that, through its constant failure, actually points toward the need for something better. It shows us again and again that these incomplete, monstrous unions are just not enough. It implicitly calls for a higher hope, a genuine, perfect reconciliation that its own universe, tragically, can never seem to provide.
Which brings us to one last, really big question. After all the wars, all the political scheming, and all the god emperors, maybe the ultimate lesson of Dune is that our greatest conflicts can't be solved by technical mastery or tyrannical control. Maybe our future depends on finding a belief that can finally make our spirit and our tools truly completely whole again.